The first thing I heard was my neighbor screaming my name like I'd set her house on fire. The second thing I saw was a bright yellow tent folding in on itself in the middle of my hayfield, and the third was Marla Vance, president of the Briar Glen Homeowners Association, standing ankle-deep in a mess she had spent 6 months pretending was not my problem. She had both hands in the air, her white summer shoes ruined, her fancy little clipboard dripping, and she kept shouting, "This is private property, somebody do something." I remember standing on my porch with an old coffee mug in my hand, thinking, well, Marla, that is exactly what I have been trying to tell you. My name is Walter Hale, and that field was not some empty patch of grass waiting for a neighborhood committee to give it a purpose. It was part of Hale Farm, 42 acres of pasture, apple trees, old fence lines, and hard-packed dirt that had belonged to my family since my grandfather came home from the war with one bad knee and enough stubbornness to build a life from scratch. I was born in the little farmhouse at the end of County Road 9. I learned to walk near the chicken coop, learned to drive in an old Ford pickup with a cracked windshield, and learned from my father that land is never just land when your family has bled on it, prayed over it, and buried half their best years inside it. My dad used to say, a fence is not there because you hate your neighbor. It is there because decent people need to know where they stop. For most of my life, that made perfect sense. Then Briar Glen showed up. It started small, the way these things always do. A developer bought the old Miller orchard south of my place and built a shiny little subdivision full of matching houses, decorative mailboxes, and people who seemed deeply offended by leaves. Within a year, they had an HOA. Within 2 years, they had rules about garage doors, lawn edges, holiday lights, and apparently the moral danger of having a trash can visible from the street. I stayed out of it. Their neighborhood was their business, and my farm was mine. At least, that was how I saw it. Marla Vance saw it differently. Marla had moved into Briar Glen from somewhere up north, though nobody could ever agree exactly where. She wore pastel cardigans in 90-degree weather, carried a clipboard like it had been issued by the federal government, and had a way of talking that made every sentence sound like a warning wrapped in a compliment. The first time she came to my gate, she looked across my pasture and said, "Walter, have you ever considered doing something more community-minded with all this space?" I told her I was doing something community-minded. I was growing hay, raising chickens, keeping my taxes paid, and minding my own business. She laughed like I had said something adorable. A few weeks later, I found a new sign posted just outside my south fence line. It had the Briar Glen logo on it, a little green tree inside a gold circle, and underneath it said, "Future Community Nature Trail." I took it down and leaned it against the HOA office door. That should have been the end of it. Instead, Marla called me selfish. Then she called me outdated. Then, one Saturday morning, I walked out with my coffee and found a family of 4 putting up a neon green tent right in the middle of my pasture. The father waved at me like we were old friends. "Morning," he said. Marla told us this was the new community camping area, and that was the moment I realized I was not dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with a land grab, wearing hiking boots and carrying marshmallows. I walked out to that tent slowly at first, mostly because I honestly thought I had to be seeing things wrong. The pasture had been cut 2 days earlier. The ground still smelled like fresh hay. And there was this young couple in matching camp chairs, setting a cooler beside one of my fence posts like they had booked the place online. Their little boy was trying to chase one of my hens, and their daughter had a bag of marshmallows tucked under her arm. I asked the father if he could move his car off the field before he crushed the irrigation line, and he gave me this confused look. He said, "Marla told us the HOA worked something out with you." I said, "No, Marla worked something out in her own head. This is private property. You need to pack up and leave." He called her right there, speakerphone on, and I could hear her voice clear as a church bell. "Walter is being dramatic again," she said. "Stay put. I will come handle him." That was when I knew she had planned the whole thing. 10 minutes later, Marla rolled up in a white SUV, climbed out wearing sunglasses the size of salad plates, and marched toward me with that clipboard tucked under her arm. She did not even glance at the family. She looked at me like I was a stubborn employee who had missed a deadline. "Walter," she said, "this is a pilot program." "A pilot program," I repeated. "On my land." She sighed, the way people sigh when they have decided you are beneath them. "Briar Glen has hundreds of families," she said. "We have children who need outdoor experiences. We have residents who cannot afford expensive vacations. This field is barely being used. I looked past her at my hay, my fence, my chickens, and then back at her. It is used every day, Marla. You just do not recognize work unless it comes with a ribbon cutting. She smiled at that, but there was something hard behind it. You always make everything personal, Walter. I said, you came onto my farm and built a campsite without permission. It got personal the second you crossed my gate. She told the family to stay where they were. I told them again, politely, to pack up before the sheriff had to explain it. They finally left, embarrassed and apologizing, but Marla stood there by my fence for another minute, staring at me like she was trying to decide whether I had just embarrassed her or challenged her. Turns out it was both. The next Thursday, she made her move in front of the whole HOA board. I was not a member of Briar Glen, thank God, but I had started attending their meetings whenever I heard something was brewing. Usually it was people arguing over porch lights or whether a basketball hoop lowered property values. That night, Marla stood at the front of the clubhouse beside a foam board map, smiling like she was about to announce a cure for something. She talked about togetherness, neighborhood wellness, family recreation, all those polished phrases people use when they want something that belongs to somebody else. Then she took a red marker and circled my farm. The perfect location, she said, is the open land north of Briar Glen. I stood up before she could finish. That land has a name, I said. It is Hale Farm, and it is not open land. It belongs to me. A few people shifted in their seats, but Marla barely paused. Walter has some concerns, she said, in that sweet little voice that made me want to bite through a horseshoe. But we believe this could be a wonderful shared resource. Shared resource, I said. You mean my property? One board member, a dentist named Curtis Bell, leaned forward and said, well, it is just a field, right? You do not have livestock out there all the time. I looked at him and said, Curtis, if I parked a tractor in your living room for the weekend, would that be just a room? Nobody laughed. Marla did, though, one short little laugh, like she had already decided the room belonged to her too. Then she said the words I still remember. Property lines are not more important than community needs. I told her property lines are exactly what keep community from turning into theft. The room got quiet after that, but not in a good way. People were not thinking about law, right and wrong. They were thinking about free camping, fire pits, kids roasting hot dogs, maybe a little neighborhood music night where nobody had to drive more than 2 minutes. Marla had sold them a dream, and I was the old farmer standing there telling them the dream was built on stolen ground. By the following weekend, she had flyers in mailboxes. Briar Glen Family Campout, it said. Food, games, nature, connection. Location, Community Meadow. Community Meadow. That was what she called my pasture. Saturday morning, I woke up to car doors slamming. Not one car, not two, I mean a whole line of them. SUVs, minivans, pickup trucks with coolers in the back, all pulling up along my gravel drive. By noon, there were tents everywhere. Kids were running through the hay. Somebody had dragged a portable grill near the barn, and a man I had never seen before was trying to tie a rope swing to my apple tree. I asked him to stop. He said, Marla said it was fine. I swear, by the end of that day, I hated those 4 words more than any curse I had ever heard. Marla said it was fine. My animals were nervous. The chickens would not come out of the coop, and I found greasy paper plates floating in the irrigation ditch. I called the sheriff. The dispatcher was kind, but tired. She said the HOA had submitted some kind of temporary recreation request, and since nobody was actively threatening me, it looked like a civil matter. Civil matter. I drove to the county office with my deed in one hand and my blood pressure in the other. A clerk named Evan pulled up the file and frowned at his screen. He said the paperwork listed the site as adjacent undeveloped land. I told him it was not adjacent. It was mine. He shrugged and said I could file a complaint. I asked how long that would take. He said, honestly, Mr. I could file a complaint. I asked how long that would take. He said, honestly, Hale, maybe a few weeks, maybe longer. I wanted to throw that stack of forms across the room, but I did not. My father raised me better than that, and besides, I started noticing something about Marla. She loved it when people lost their temper. It gave her a story to tell. Angry farmer attacks community project. She could use that. So I went home, sat at my kitchen table, and did the least dramatic thing I could think of. I started documenting everything. Every tent, every fire too close to dry grass, every beer can in the ditch, every car parked on the field. I took pictures of the flyers, the signs, the broken fence rail, and the children climbing where they should not have been. Then I called Nora Keane, an attorney from town who had helped me settle a boundary dispute years before. She listened without interrupting, which was already more than most people had done. When I finished, she said, "Walter, do not give Marla the fight she wants. Give her the paper trail she cannot explain." So that is what I did. I posted new no trespassing signs when nobody could pretend not to see them. I installed a camera at the gate. I filed the complaint. I reported the open fires and sanitation problems to the county health office. And quietly I called an old friend named Dale Mercer, who wrote for the county paper and had never met a local scandal he did not enjoy. I did not ask him to print anything. I just told him he might want to drive past Briar Glen the following Saturday. Because Marla was not planning another little campout, she was planning a full-blown weekend festival, complete with a stage, food vendors, games for the kids, and a speech where she intended to announce that Community Meadow was the future of Briar Glen. And as I watched her people hammer tent stakes into soil my grandfather had turned by hand, I stopped feeling helpless. I started feeling patient. There is a difference. Helplessness makes you panic. Patience makes you watch, take notes, and wait for someone arrogant enough to build their own downfall in public. The festival started just after sunrise the next Saturday, and I will give Marla this much: she knew how to put on a show. There were balloons tied to the HOA sign, a rented stage near the far end of my field, folding tables covered in red checkered cloth, and enough people carrying lawn chairs to make you think somebody had announced free barbecue for the whole county. By 10 o'clock, kids were running around with painted faces, a local cover band was tuning guitars, and Marla was walking through the crowd in a pale blue dress with a gold sash that said Community Director across her chest. She saw me standing near the gate and gave me that little smile of hers, the one that always looked like she'd just found a way to charge somebody for breathing. She came over and said, "Walter, I hope you are finally ready to see what progress looks like." I looked past her at a bounce house sitting beside my hayfield, a food truck parked on ground that had not seen a truck in 50 years, and a line of portable wash stations set up near the old drainage ditch. I said, "Marla, progress usually comes with permission." She rolled her eyes, like I was a man complaining about loud music instead of a property owner watching strangers turn his farm into a county fair. Then she went up on stage, took the microphone, and started talking about vision, unity, and the future of Briar Glen. I stood there listening to her call my pastured community meadow for the third time that morning, and I thought about my grandfather. He used to say that some folks mistake confidence for ownership. They think if they say something loud enough, everybody else will forget who built it. Around noon, Dale from the paper showed up in his old station wagon, carrying a camera bag and wearing the same brown hat he had worn since 1998. He nodded at me, then walked around like he was just another guest. A little after that, 2 county health vehicles came up the road, followed by a sheriff deputy who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Marla noticed them right away. At first, she actually smiled, probably thinking they'd come to congratulate her. Then one of the inspectors started asking questions about permits, food handling, sanitation, open fires, and who had authorized the use of private agricultural land. That smile faded fast. I watched her point toward me, then toward the board members, then back toward the inspectors, trying to turn every question into somebody else's problem. But paperwork has a funny way of losing its magic when people start reading it carefully. The temporary recreation request did not authorize camping. The food vendors did not have the right permits. The HOA had used language vague enough to sound official, but not clear enough to survive an actual inspection. And while all that was happening, the sanitation setup behind the stage failed. I never found out which contractor cut corners or who ignored the warning signs, but one minute people were dancing near the stage, and the next there was a foul surge spreading across the low part of the field. The band stopped mid-song. Parents grabbed their kids. Folding chairs tipped over. Somebody shouted, "Is that water?" And somebody else yelled, "Do not step in it." Then I heard Marla scream my name from across the field like I had personally summoned the whole ugly mess out of the ground. She stood there frozen, shoes ruined, cupboard soaked, her little gold sash sticking to her dress while the crowd scattered in every direction. And the strange thing was, when she screamed, "This is private property, somebody do something," I almost laughed. Not because it was funny exactly. It was because she had finally said the one sentence I had been trying to get through to her for months. The deputy shut the festival down. The health department closed the site. Dale took pictures of the abandoned tents, the ruined stage, the food trucks backed up near my gate, and Marla arguing with inspectors while her own board members quietly moved away from her. By Monday, the story was everywhere in town. The county opened an investigation. The HOA was fined. The board claimed they had been misled. Marla claimed she had been betrayed. Nobody believed either of them much. At the next Briar Glen meeting, people who had once applauded her stood up and demanded to know why she had used their dues to create a campground on land she did not own. Curtis Bell, the dentist who had called my farm just a field, looked like he wanted to crawl under his folding chair. Marla resigned 2 weeks later, though she called it stepping aside for personal reasons. I called it losing the crowd she thought she controlled. A few neighbors came by after that to help repair the fence and clean the ditch. Some apologized. Some did not know how. One man brought his teenage son over every Saturday for a month, and that boy worked harder than most grown men I know. I did not forgive everybody overnight, but I respected the ones who showed up. The field took time to heal. So did I. People ask me whether I regret how it all ended, and I honestly do not know what answer they want. I never wanted a war with my neighbors. I wanted my gate left alone. I wanted my animals left in peace. I wanted people to understand that a community is not a group of people voting to take what belongs to the quietest person in the room. But maybe you see it differently. Maybe you think I should have fought harder sooner. Maybe you think Marla got what she deserved. Or maybe you think everyone involved let pride turn a bad situation into a disaster. Tell me what you think in the comments, because I have learned one thing for sure. When somebody crosses your boundary and calls it progress, you better decide where your line is before they decide it for you. And if you have ever had a neighbor, an HOA, or a self-appointed queen with a clipboard try to run your life, share your story below. I read more of those than you might think.